Hi, everyone. Welcome to Ad Age In Depth Super Bowl. I'm Janine Poggi, editor of Ad Age. Thanks for joining us as we count down to Super Bowl 56. With less than 1 week to go until kickoff, marketers have certainly been eager to build buzz for their commercials, while big game advertisers will continue to employ many of the same tactics that have long made Super Bowl ads successful, like nostalgia, celebrities, and of course, animals and babies. There are also nods to new forms of innovation. NFTs will make a cameo, and there will even be a few references to virtual worlds and the metaverse. Over the course of the next 2 hours, we will hear from brands and creatives about how new forms of innovation are really altering Super Bowl marketing, and we will see how brands are navigating hitting the right tone for the current times. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our sponsors for helping to make this live event happen. We have our co-presenting sponsors, System One and YouTube, and our supporting sponsor, TalkWalker. Whether a Super Bowl advertiser is looking to make people laugh, reminisce, or even get them to shed a tear, doing so while prioritizing diversity and inclusion continues to be critical. Super Bowl advertising really helps set the stage and the tone for creativity in the year ahead. And with around 100 million people expected to tune in on Sunday, it is essential to make sure that the creative being delivered is really authentic and appeals to a diverse audience. So, to kick things off today, we will take a look at some of the progress that's been made over the past year and really discuss what needs to happen next in order for these efforts to make Super Bowl ads more inclusive. Joining me this morning to have this discussion is Rich Ferrero, Chief Communications Officer at GLAAD and Executive Producer of GLAAD Media Awards, Jane Mazer, VP of Corporate Communications at Hologic, Cheryl Overton, Chief Experience Officer at Cheryl Overton Communications, and Jason Rosario, Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at BBDO Worldwide. Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Good to be here.
Thanks so much for joining us during this crazy and hectic time, I'm sure. So let's start with a broad-based conversation, kind of setting the tone for any progress and what we really are seeing happening as it relates to diversity and inclusion. Jason, can you kind of take a look at the big picture here? What progress have you seen made over the past few years when it comes to representation and inclusivity in Super Bowl ads?
Absolutely. I have to give brands credit and agencies credit for the amount of progress that we've seen in inclusion across the board. Specifically, just last year, for example, we saw an uptick in the representation of the LGBTQ plus community, for example. Our Super Bowl spot for M&M's featured Dan Levy, who is a well-known activist and an advocate in the community. And so I'd like to see that. I also like to see brands taking a little bit of a risk, quite frankly, in stepping out and really tackling some really hard to have conversations. In that same spot, we talked about social commentary that was so popular at the time. We talked about the Karen thing. We talked about mansplaining. So, I think we're starting to see brands generally take on more of a bit of courage, right, to kind of tackle some of these conversations. But there is some room for improvement, I would say. When you look at Hispanics, for example, or the Latinx community, who I happen to be a part of as an Afro-Latino man, we haven't seen as much representation. We don't see a lot of us on screen. So I'd like to see brands do more of that. And then more broadly, I'd like to see brands take more of an intersectional approach to their storytelling. I think still oftentimes we're seeing brands in terms of their casting show up in a kind of tick the box kind of way in terms of really making sure that they're so concerned about being inclusive that we're not really paying enough attention around kind of how we're depicting certain communities and how proactive we have to be in that storytelling. So I'd like to see more of that happening, and I'd like to see that happen this year, hopefully.
Rich, can you build upon that for the LGBTQ plus community? What progress have you seen really made over the past couple of years? What needs to happen next?
Yeah, and so GLAAD's an organization that works with all forms of media, including advertisers, because media has power. And first, I like to think about why inclusion in advertising matters. From a social justice organization, it matters because consumers today trust brands. The Edelman Trust Barometer that just came out showed that consumers trust brands more than government, more than media. So glad we're putting a lot of resources into working with brands through our new project, the Visibility Project, to push for more inclusion because we know it will have an effect. Now, when it comes to LGBTQ inclusion in the Super Bowl, it was funny to hear Jason mention the M&M's commercial with Dan Levy, which we hold up as a great example of representation, because I remember one of my first projects at GLAAD 15 years ago was a commercial that was for Snickers, where two men were eating a Snickers bar, were about to kiss, and were so grossed out by the idea that they might kiss another guy that they started to beat each other up and get quite violent. It was one of my first projects at GLAAD to push back on the advertising industry on that representation and to work with Mars for all of their brands, including Snickers, including M&Ms, to get representation better. So I think we started off, and I could see Hollywood tracking in this way as well, though I think the advertising industry is still light years behind Hollywood when it comes to LGBTQ inclusion. But you saw the problematic content. I'm going back 15 years in the Super Bowl. Then there was a period of relative invisibility. Occasionally you saw famous faces pop up for several years. This was also a period when I think advertisers were fearful of including LGBTQ people, and we heard from advertisers who were fearful of backlash from the Gen Pop if they were to include an LGBTQ celebrity or an LGBTQ family. Jason mentioned, though, 2 years ago that there was a turning point. And 2 years ago, we saw nearly a dozen ads that ran during the Super Bowl that included LGBTQ people. Most of these, though, were famous faces. That industry did get intersectionality right. So that year, we saw not just gay cisgender men in ads, but we saw famous faces who were trans, like Isis King and Trace Lysette in a TurboTax ad. We saw intersectional celebrities like Lil Nas X in a Doritos ad. Last year, though, the representation of LGBTQ people was down from the year prior. But this year, what we're hoping to see is that the advertising industry not only includes LGBTQ celebrities, but includes LGBTQ families. I think when you see a lot of ads that run that feature the diaspora of America today and try and show diverse families, we don't always see an LGBTQ family, and that's where we need to be. And that's where we're hoping to see from brands this year, and something that we'll be tracking at GLAAD in real time during the game.
I think a lot of the times when you talk about diversity and inclusion in Super Bowl ads, we're looking a lot in front of the camera at who is being cast, but oftentimes it starts with who is behind the camera, whether it's the agencies working on the ad and their team makeup, the director and production teams and things like that. Jane, can you talk a little bit about those priorities for Hologic, what you were thinking from the onset when you guys were like, all right, we're going to be in the Super Bowl. How were you prioritizing diversity and inclusion from the early stages of the creation of the ad?
So as a women's health company, it was imperative that we made sure that our representation was authentic to the voice of women and not, one specific audience of women, but all women. And so we really reached out to make sure that our entire team was inclusive of a women-led initiative. So from creative to directors to talent to the team inside of Hologic, every single step was driven by a woman. And so we're proud of the partnerships with Che Creative, with Little Minx, with Child as our director, with Cheryl Overton and her team, as well as obviously the voice of our ad, Mary J. Blige, who has been a huge proponent of women's health and a partner of ours for several years. So being in the Super Bowl was just a natural evolution of where we have gone, but the authenticity of the voices of the women we're trying to reach was essential for being successful here.
Cheryl, can you talk a little bit more about your priorities as you're thinking about strategy for a Super Bowl ad like this? What you were really thinking about working with the company to prioritize their media and their strategy around that?
Yeah, thanks for that, because I think one of the things we know, first of all, it always starts, as Jane said, with the lived experience of who we're trying to reach and engage with. And so we really made sure that we understood women, women who are carrying so much in their daily schedules. And while we are as different as our fingerprints, there are some common things that all women, regardless of age or ethnicity or where we live geographically in the country, we're doing the most for everybody else, and we tend to put ourselves last in terms of our health. We even surveyed women to sort of just credentialize and make sure we were still there, because we've seen a drop, particularly since the pandemic, in women really deprioritizing or putting on the back burner their own sort of health checkups and their own screening appointments. This data is alarming to us. And with Hologic being a women's health company, it was really important that we used the fact that women were starting to treat these appointments as errands that could wait. We wanted to do something to be disruptive. So in the sea of these wonderful ads that come, this, the Super Bowl is when everybody brings out the big celebrities, the big, the funny, the yucks, the big visual effects. We understood that in a sea of that, we don't have a chip, we don't have a cookie, we don't have a big fast car. We understood we've got to be disruptive, but we've got to be disruptive on something that's really real. Without any irony, I say we're doing this to help women and to really help women be their best, live their best, and frankly save their lives with what diagnostic testing really does. So with that, the strategy was, let us really show what real women are juggling every day. And so whether you are a superstar like Mary J. Blige, or an entrepreneur like myself, a corporate executive like Jane, an editor like you, or an essential worker who hasn't had the luxury of being home, and, and she's had to care for her family and go to work and be out in this, we wanted to tell a story that in this one woman's slice of life really spoke for all of us and really helped give women a bit of a playbook how you can prioritize it and still juggle everything that you're doing.
Can we take a step back too and look at women historically in the Super Bowl and sort of how representation of women in the game has changed over the years? Feel free, anyone, to kind of jump in on this. I'm curious, what you've seen in terms of the shift in women's portrayal in Super Bowl commercials.
Well, I'm happy to jump in and say, we understand that we've got to sort of get eyeballs and make the big thing. But I'm proud to say there are no bikini clad wet t-shirt moments in our ad, though no shaming of that if that's how women want to show up. But we don't feel like we have to resort to that. We think that the viewing public is more attuned and intelligent to that. They don't need that to receive a message. And we feel extremely proud that, to Jane's point, an advertisement that was not just sort of fueled and created by women, but centered the experiences of women. That is what we held true. Early on in my career, I'm dating myself because it's 20 plus years ago now. I was one of the members of the strategic marketing communications team for the Dove campaign for Real Beauty. This has become bellwether marketing to women. But back then, trust me, as a Black woman, as a woman of size, fighting for a woman with stretch marks, fighting for a woman who was a double-digit dress size, that was revolutionary. I didn't make many friends sometimes in conference rooms. Now, the fact that we all believe that is how our tableau should be represented, that is a win. And that shows how far we've come in advertising. And I think on advertising's biggest stage, the Super Bowl, many brands are already operating that way. So for me, that's a sign of progress.
Jason, can you talk about some of the roadblocks or challenges, brands face as they try to prioritize diversity and inclusion? Working on M&M Spot last year, what were some of the hurdles or some of the potentially even pushback that you received as you sort of worked through the process with them?
Yeah, I think oftentimes, and I talk to my creatives about this, they come to me with a piece of work or a script, and they ask me two questions. Hey, Jason, is this offensive? What do you think about this? And I'm like, guys, if you're asking that question, then odds are that it is offensive. And quite frankly, it's too late at this point, right? And so I think part of the problem that all brands face is how do we start that process earlier on of thinking about inclusion as part of the story, right? So when you think about, for example, ignoring race in an appearance-based industry where there's a history of discrimination, you have to be very, very particular and very proactive and very specific around how you write the brief. Because studies show that when you write a brief and it's kind of nebulous and out there, not specific to identities or communities, 78% of the time those roles go to white actors, right? And so I think when you think about that, you often hear people say, well, I'm colorblind. Well, no, I need you to see color, because you're inadvertently causing a lot of harm by not writing briefs specifically for a community. So it's important. But when it came to the M&M spot, I think that's a great example of how all of this comes together. Of course, we started off with the question of, what is the story that we're trying to tell, right? Because that question is an automatic, proactive question that centers diversity and inclusion at the middle of that story, as opposed to kind of trying to account for it at the end of the process. So we started to ask that question, and started to consider, how do we tackle certain conversations around some of the ones that I've already mentioned, while still staying true to the brand ethos of being a jester, right? And using humor to kind of connect people. So that was incredibly important. And then as we went through it, making sure that the casting decisions that we made were thought through, not just in terms of representation, but we've all talked about it thus far, authenticity. How do we make sure that those cast members were authentic in their stories and in their roles? So we considered set and setting, and nuance in the conversation as we wrote those briefs. And then lastly, we just made sure that we, every step along the way, had a checks and balance system to make sure that each part of that process was accounted for. So, I think I'm pretty proud of everything that we accomplished with the spot, but I do think that there is opportunity here going forward to being more proactive earlier on in the process, as opposed to checking the box at the end with casting.
Jane, how did you guys navigate that this year in terms of being proactive from the beginning, and then also the checks and balances to sort of make sure that everything that's being delivered sort of like passed the smell test, I guess?
Well, we started with what we wanted to accomplish, which was what we hope at the end of the day, that both genders, we were actually wanting to appeal to men and women, knowing that this is such a large stage that attracts pretty much a 50-50 audience, that the message made sense, that women understood what their role it was in this, and men understood what their role was in driving women to take prioritization of their own health. So that in itself is where we started. And as we went through this, our checks and balances were, are we living into that message? Do we ultimately accomplish a call to action, a behavior change that people understand? And we knew, as Cheryl had said, we did some research to figure out there is an unmet need here that we know we have to accomplish. So we're hoping that we're going to be pretty successful at the end of the day by increasing awareness, but also behavior.
Rich, how do we measure progress? There's a lot of challenges in terms of the reporting structure. So even things like being able to ask people to self-identify and things like that are often a problem in terms of saying, okay, the production company has X amount of people that identify as LGBTQ+. So what do the conversation need to be at this point? How do we sort of measure what's moving things forward, what's moving the needle?
Yeah, and glad, like I said, we try and track the representation on screen during the game, but off screen, especially when it comes to LGBTQ, the industry has yet to crack the code of how to properly and respectfully count LGBTQ creatives behind the scenes. And I think that Jane and Jason both, and Cheryl, went over some of the ways that brands should approach diversity and the homework that you should do before releasing that spot. And I do think that it's so important right now for the industry to start learning some of those best practices, because I do worry. I mentioned a few years ago there was hesitancy to include LGBTQ people, not only in Super Bowl ads, but ads in general, because of a backlash from the Gen Pop. Well, now that's not the case. Now the Gen Pop overall is embracing of diversity, including LGBTQ inclusion in ads. I think that the holdup and why we're not seeing more ads in the industry is that the industry is concerned about getting that inclusion right and getting that inclusion authentic. And one way to make sure that you're getting the inclusion authentic is to have LGBTQ consultants behind the scenes and leads in creating that content, and in not only your talent that you're placing on screen, but the full cast and crew, the directors, etc. We did a poll last year with Procter & Gamble of 200 advertisers, brand execs, and ad agency execs, and we asked them what were the barriers to LGBTQ inclusion in ads. 60% of them were concerned about getting that inclusion right. So it's on groups like GLAAD and it's on consulting firms to make sure that we're putting out the resources for the industry, but it's also on the industry to make sure that they're using those resources and to take the risk. Because I think when we see a Super Bowl ad that features a queer couple in a leading role, there's going to be huge positive earned media. There's going to be huge buzz. And if you're looking to break through the clutter of Super Bowl, diversity is a way to do that. You just have to make sure you're doing it authentically and with impact.
How do you navigate any of this pushback? I don't know if with BBDO and M&M's last year there was any, I don't know, what do you sort of do when there is pushback?
I think part of the issue with pushback oftentimes is that brands, when they step out publicly around a specific issue, with diversity or otherwise, whether it's a social issue or not, often get criticized because they may not stand in principles that their employees feel that are authentic, right, and are connected with their organization. So I think, Rich, you've talked a lot about, and we've all talked a lot about kind of what it looks like when the work exists in the world. But I think we need to think about how we reverse engineer so that we achieve those outcomes and think about the teams and the processes that need to be in place at these organizations to make sure that we achieve those outcomes, right? And so as a DE&I practitioner, oftentimes I have a conversation with our client and they want to focus on the comms and the output and the creative product. And I have to kind of bring them back and say, well, who are your teams that are touching this brand, right? Show me the makeup of those teams and make sure that not only are those folks aligned, but that your principles and that you're living in these principles in your organization, because then otherwise it won't be authentic, right? And so there's nothing worse than pushback from your internal community, right? You think external communities pushing back on you is rough. There's nothing rougher than your internal community feeling as though you're not showing up authentically. And so I think that's why it's important for us to make sure, and for brands to make sure that they're aligned first before they go out publicly with any sort of messaging.
Cheryl, what did you find as the biggest roadblock or challenge, and how did you and your team navigate it?
Well, fortunately, we didn't with Hologic, I would say. That they are a wonderful partner that is navigating this with fearlessness, but also with open minds. I mean, I think the knowledge sharing and the thought partnership is critical. And the things they didn't know, they were very trusting in our counsel on how to get there. I have to really add to what both Rich and Jason were saying, because I think that some of these in brands and their earnestness to do the right thing and to move forward, there are two sides to this continuum that we want to avoid. One is the paralysis of waiting until we get it right, or being so nervous to move that we're doing nothing. And that is a roadblock that I see happening in companies and with brands very often. Like they've got the mindset, they want to do something, but because they fear we don't know enough, have we earned our right to talk about this credibly? What more do we have to do? And what I have to encourage them is that no certificate is going to come and be bestowed upon you before you get to talk about this. You have to start talking about it, because this is the world that we live in. Utilize your partners and build the right teams internally, to Jason's point, so that at least when you're taking these steps and forging new territories, you're doing so with some backing and with some insight to fuel you. The other side of that continuum is the dreaded virtue signaling, because I think we've all seen work and behavior, particularly in the past several years, of people who are doing it to do it. And I will say, audiences are smarter than that. I think we see, when work is insightful and absolutely is informed by a real human truth versus it's a gay couple with a baby of a different race, and they're doing this, like you're doing too much, like you're doing this and it's not a part of the narrative. It's not really speaking to anyone. It almost feels like checking the box to say we did it. That is what we want to avoid as well. So I think having the right teams internally, having the right partners and counselors is how you get it through that. Because I think, sadly, and I hope we won't on Super Bowl Sunday, we've seen a lot of big ads that are starting to sort of go that direction too. And it's like, come on, guys, like this doesn't even make sense. Who are you talking to? So we want to make sure that we hold honest. Those of us around this table, we're holding our brands, our colleagues, holding them true to staying true to the human truth and to the insights that should really guide all of this. And we will get to the outcomes that we want, but we've got to really be sure that we're representing what humans need and what humans want and their lived experiences.
Let's talk a little bit more about the narrative in particular. This year in the Super Bowl, we're seeing a lot of brands really go more lighthearted, humorous route. Kind of want to entertain people given the past 2 years and what's been going on. Given that and wanting to keep sort of that tone, is it appropriate, or is it something brands should do to really lean into societal topics, or does it not have to be leaning into a social justice kind of movement messaging and more so playing a natural part in the story itself?
I can jump in on that. It's a conversation that I often have with our clients, right? The concern is, well, we don't want to alienate our core audience, right? Which is veiled talk. And I challenge them and I say, well, even within your core audience, there are dimensions of diversity that you can credibly touch on and speak on. And what are those? And have you done the exercise to identify those guardrails and understand the language that allows you to then credibly step in that space? So I think, and there's also a difference, I'd say that there's a difference between taking a stand and acknowledging something, right? Not all brands need to be activist brands, right? But brands do have a say and they do have a responsibility, in my opinion, in this world to kind of acknowledge the state of the world that we live in, right? And so how you do that needs to be true to your brand ethos, right? So M&M's, as an example, is a brand rooted in humor. As a way to connect people. So there's a way to touch on certain things through humor. But I think it's up to us as our clients and our brands partners to help them excavate that journey, right? And really think about where are they within their realm of possibility and influence to speak on certain things, and then helping them develop the language to do that.
We have a question from Lindsay Dora on LinkedIn. It can be sensitive to ask people to self-identify. Please be more specific about how to make sure we have the right people at the right place and at the right time. How can we ask without asking? I think that's a great question.
One is, if you're working on a spot that includes LGBTQ people, go to an LGBTQ consulting firm that's owned and operated by queer people to ensure that they're on your spot working with you. Find the resources from the community and bring them to the table early on and give them a meaningful consultation on the spot and on the creation of the spot.
You have to be intentional. You have if it's not organic. And if it doesn't represent the way your organization is currently made up, you have to be intentional. And so I have to applaud brands who are intentional and even the partners they choose to do that. I know that at Cheryl Overton Communications, we absolutely have a tenet where we lean into minority-owned firms, including women-owned firms, of course. We lean into our partners for work that's it. We don't change the brief. Everybody's got the credentials. Everybody's got the experience, but that's our way to ensure that we're getting minority owned and minority led partners on work, even if a particular brand or corporation hasn't yet evolved internally to do so.
Yeah. And can I just add one more thing to that? So as kind of your agency partner, those of us who are in charge of kind of mining insights, I think it's also important for us to maybe take a little bit more time and understand that, we often say that communities aren't homogenous, right? We're not these monoliths. I think that's been overstated, but I think there is something to be said about understanding sub-pockets of culture and how we make decisions, and understanding things like generational differences, these themes that we've often thought would take place over the course of 30, 40 years that have been accelerated by the pandemic, that have been accelerated by technology. How are we taking the time to really understand these sub-pockets of culture and addressing their needs specifically proactively? I think that's also part of it.
We lost Jane, but I have one more question from Julie on LinkedIn. How are you testing authenticity and what technology are you using to test that? Is there any data involved in data being collected to sort of help with the process?
We work with a lot of brands that just use social sentiment in terms of authenticity and seeing what the response is, positive or negative, when a brand launches. I think too, in terms of authenticity, it's a 365-day-a-year conversation. And especially when it comes for LGBTQ, just as an example, don't just think of us during Pride Month. Think of us throughout the year. Think of us during the Super Bowl, and have these conversations like we're having now about the best practices. And we are actually having a conversation with the NFL to talk about progress and how far the Super Bowl has come in terms of diversity. On Thursday, we'll be hosting the NFL's first panel on LGBTQ inclusion in advertising at SoFi Stadium. So I think that there's movement on this, but that discussion of authenticity has to happen year round and early on, not when you're in the heat of the moment planning a campaign.
I would add, I've worked with clients. I worked with Procter and Gamble on the Talk many years ago, and that, that's a company that really believes in data driven. I mean, we did everything from neuroscience testing to see how people were receiving it, before it, in addition to message testing, et cetera. It doesn't always have to be like that. I think, to Rich's point, I think the more organic we can make it, let us keep talking to our target along the way, let us keep relying on our internal experts and partners, is really critical. So sometimes we have the ability to, with data, really test every inch of things, but you don't want to test things to death. Does it feel natural? I think that what Jason said earlier is so resonant, and it really hits. By the time you're asking me, does this make sense? Well, it probably doesn't, so let's sort of revisit ourselves throughout the process. It's okay to interrogate ourselves as well, as people who are responsible for creating and shepherding work that the public consumes. That's our responsibility as brand communicators.
Great. Well, that's all the time we have. I could go on for much longer. I appreciate you all being here. Thank you to Rich, Jane, Cheryl, and Jason for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Up next, we have Studio 30 sitting down with one of our sponsors, System 1.
Thank you, Janine. Big game, even bigger budget. Knowing the right tone to strike is just half the battle when it comes to standing out during the Super Bowl. Hi, everybody. My name is Natalie Zafat, and I'm an Ad Age Studio 30 contributing editor. Today, I am joined by System 1 CMO John Evans to hear a little bit more about what's worked and what hasn't for big game advertisers, and some lessons that brands can take home about maximizing consumer impact. Welcome, John.
Natalie, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me on.
Of course. Well, it's no secret that every brand wants to win the Super Bowl in terms of ads. Tell us a little bit more about how System 1 really works to measure the performance and the impact of those big ads.
Yeah. Well, listen, it works like this. So basically, we make decisions based on our System 1, which is our kind of emotion, it's instinct. And what we've found by looking at advertising over many, many years is advertising that makes us feel something will be the most successful. And so we've been tracking advertising for about 15 years. We've got 70,000 ads on our Test Your Ad database. But probably the event we look forward to more than any other, of course, is the Super Bowl, because that's where the best advertisers in the world are doing their very best work, and they've got the biggest audience as well. So what we do is we actually, within 1 hour of any Super Bowl ad going on air on Super Bowl night, we have got it tested with hundreds of the audience, basically. And what we do is we ask them how they feel. So what emotion did they feel? It's second by second, when did that emotion come through for them? And then what we do is we then rank the ads. So every year we end up with up to 100, actually, because over Super Bowl night, there's usually sort of 80, 90 or 100 advertisers. And we rank them based on how effective they are and how emotional it was. And we can predict from that which of the adverts are going to be the most successful.
It's awesome. I know you said that you've been doing this 15 years, but for about 6 years, you've really been honing in and zeroing in on those Super Bowl ads. I wonder if you can tell us, what have you learned? And also, what's the secret sauce to really nailing a Super Bowl commercial?
Yeah, well, it's really fascinating to see who wins. And do you know what? Every year I look at the chat on social media, I listen to what the experts are saying. And almost every year there's a surprise. It's not often the ad that you necessarily think is going to be the most successful that ends up winning. And last year was a really good case in point, actually, because the number one ad last year was Huggies. And it might be a surprise. It didn't necessarily get the most conversation going on social media. It wasn't necessarily a pick from many experts. But what was so great about Huggies is it appealed to everybody. And the thing about the Super Bowl is it's the greatest show on earth. It's the one that we all watch. It should be the time when we make advertising that appeals to everybody. And who isn't emotionally who doesn't feel emotional when you see babies being born? And I have to say, Huggies, I don't know if you know this, but Huggies actually filmed babies that were born on the morning of Super Bowl itself. So not only was this a very kind of cleverly devised ad, but it was actually almost live in the way they did it. But the other thing that they got right, and this is a theme that we see time and time again, is they use humor. They made us laugh, they made us cry, they made us feel something. And actually, if we trace successful Super Bowl ads over time, a very common theme is the use of humor. You want to be funny, you want to be entertaining, and of course, Super Bowl is about enjoyment. It's about the football, of course, but it's also about having a good time with your friends, and so entertainment is very key.
I love that Huggy spot, and kind of thinking through all of the ads that come to mind when you think about those big wins over the years. You also come to mind some of the flops. So you can't help but think of some of those ads where they got the celebrity, had that big storyline, but it just didn't kind of hit. I wonder if you can share with us some of the don'ts that you've seen over the years, and then maybe on the other side, give us the brands that have actually gotten it right and what worked for them.
Absolutely. Well, we've got a really interesting example actually last year, because 2 years ago, the winning ad was from Jeep. And I don't know if you remember this one, but they had Bill Murray doing Groundhog Day with a Jeep in it. And it was, again, it was the principles of that we see in the Huggies ad. It was universal. It's a film that most of us will have seen or known. He's a very good actor. And it was funny, it kind of, made us smile, it made us laugh, and it was very, very well done. And of course, Jeep was also the star of the ad, which is very important, because with so many adverts on at the same time, trying to compete for your attention, you need to make sure people remember who you are. And they did that incredibly well. So we have a 5-star rating system, and they got 5 stars, which puts them in the top 1% of all ads on our database. So incredibly well done. Interestingly, though, roll on a year. Now we've had the pandemic, and we're now into the kind of pandemic year 2021. And Jeep actually came almost near the bottom of the charts. And I don't know if you remember, they did a Bruce Springsteen ad. It was called The Middle, where he drives to the very middle of the country. And it was slightly sad. And it was also a little bit political, because they were trying to make a political statement about, it was well intentioned, by the way. But what we know about advertising is if you draw on negative themes or politics or things that don't necessarily unite us, what happens is the audience feels sad. So what they did is, rather than unite the audience by making us laugh, and telling a funny story, they actually left us feeling a little bit flat. So this only scored 1.8, which was one of the lower scores of last year. So again, Super Bowl, remember why we're there. We're there to have fun. We're there to be entertained. We're not really there to kind of, be reminded of divisions in society and so on. So that's definitely one to avoid.
Okay, no politics, got it.
Yes.
To the humor, or if you're going to hit on something serious, make sure there's levity. That's a great lesson. I think the last time we spoke, John, you gave me some really interesting stats. I'm remembering you told me that 80% of the big game ads had a celebrity, and 50% of the big game ads are actually from brand new advertisers, brands who never advertised at the Super Bowl before. What other stats do you think that viewers might be surprised to learn?
Well, I think one thing, the benefit of tracking over the last kind of 6 years, is we can see how Super Bowl advertising has changed. And one of the delightful things is actually how inclusive Super Bowl advertising has become. So if we look at the top 10 last year, the entire top 10 featured a diverse cast. And in fact, 8 of the top 10 had Black actors in lead roles. And I think that's something to be really celebrated, that we've really embraced inclusion to a great extent in Super Bowl advertising, and that's got to be a good thing, because there is no better place to do that than on Super Bowl night. So that's something that's been really good. And as you said, Natalie, like, we were very surprised actually at how many advertisers each year are new, because you kind of assume that Super Bowl is the same advertisers again, but actually when you look at DoorDash, for example, that's a new advertiser last year. They did incredibly well with Sesame Street. I don't know if you remember that one. That was very, very well done. And the other, of course, thing about we shouldn't forget about Super Bowl is celebrities have a really big role to play. And it's amazing if you look at sort of Doritos or Cheetos, brands like that, the amount of them that use celebrities. But the important thing is to have the celebrity interwoven with your story, of course. So you want to make sure that they remember the brand, who you are, as much as they remember the celebrity. But they've definitely got a big role to play. And of course they bring familiarity, they bring entertainment, and often the music, of course, because this year there's plenty of ads that feature famous musicians as well. That's another good tactic.
Yeah, a lot of key points there, right? Music, the idea of a celebrity really kind of bringing emotion to it and familiarity, but the importance that the celebrity also has to be connected. It can't feel like you just kind of slap this person into a video. I want to come back to that in just a minute, but before I do, I want to look at this year's ads. Super exciting that some of the trailers have already come out. I wonder if you can tell us what's trending big so far.
Well, I mean, one of the ones that came out early actually and created a lot of hype was the Pepsi halftime show film, which was incredible. I mean, the production quality was immense, and of course, having 4 superstar rappers in that, I think it's about 2 minutes, wasn't it? The film that came out, absolutely brilliant. And in fact, what's really interesting about it is we also test every teaser as well as every Super Bowl ad. And what's quite interesting is the teasers rarely do that well. In fact, if we go to last year, the best performing teaser was only a 3-star. And yet what you can see here is actually Pepsi have almost scored a 5-star teaser. We've never seen a 5-star teaser before. And what this suggests is that Pepsi are turning up with their game well and truly on. So I would expect to see something special from Pepsi. I mean, they've been a regular Super Bowl advertiser for many years. I once went actually in 2011 as a guest of theirs and saw in person the amount of work that goes into a Super Bowl night is incredible. I mean, it is really a spectacular. And Pepsi are one of those, brands and companies that really commits. But they've done a superb job of this hype film.
I mean, you just hear the word Pepsi and you think of your favorite halftime show. I do. I think of Britney and Aerosmith. Everybody kind of has their moment that they recall, and it certainly, the word Pepsi, I think, triggers it. I wonder if we can also, kind of looking ahead at Sunday, think about what viewers should keep in mind when they're watching the big game. What kinds of sentiments, if someone wanted to play along at home and see what was going to be trending or what was going to, score big in terms of an ad with impact, what should people be thinking about?
Well, it's a really fun thing to do because, the ads themselves are part of the whole experience, aren't they? And we will be measuring them. So if you do want to go and, keep an eye on the scores, testyourad.com, by the way, is where you can go and see live how they're doing. If you want to test yourself against the public, then please do. The key with advertising is to try and think how you feel about it. So often what you read in the press or follow on social media isn't always actually how the public responds. So as you see an ad, just pay attention to the emotion it creates in you. Do you feel happy? Do you feel surprised? And how strong is that emotion? And that your instinct is often the best way of doing it. So don't overthink an ad. Just go on instinct. How does it make me feel? And am I smiling? Am I laughing? Those are the kind of emotions that we know from the research we do at System 1 predict how advertising will actually do long term. Because basically, positive emotions are lodged in our memory, and they also kind of capture our attention. And it's those things that we remember in the long term. So in future, when you're going into a store, it's the ones that made you feel good that you're most likely to kind of look out for when you're buying. So that's the key thing. What do you enjoy? And then maybe test yourself against the experts, see what, go online and see what the experts are saying, and then go and check out our survey and see what you think. Have we got it right?
All right, I'm going to do it. I heard you talking a little bit about your rating system, and I'm curious. We have a couple more minutes. If I can ask you some bonus questions.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about your rating system. I wonder, if we looked, for example, at the DoorDash ad. I know we mentioned it earlier, the one from last year with Daveed Diggs. Tell us a little bit more about how, for example, you measured this one.
Yeah, no, thank you for asking. So it's a great question. So what we do is we, when the ad goes out on Super Bowl night, we'll send a survey out to hundreds of people, and we'll ask people to watch the ad themselves and tell us at the end of the ad how they felt overall, and also how intense that emotion, because actually how strong your emotion is also very indicative of what you're going on to do. And then everyone watches it again. And this is the interesting bit, because we asked people to say which emotion they felt as they're watching the ad. Now, this is fascinating because we work out what scenes create, happiness, which ones maybe created negative emotion. And it's not the negative emotion is bad, because it often has a role to play, in the kind of story arc, as you might describe it. Like any film has got peaks and troughs, hasn't it? So it's the same with advertising. But the key thing is to end on a high. So what we're looking for is ads that at the end of the ad make people feel very happy when they leave that. And then what we also do is we find out from people what do they associate with the ad. So what comes to mind? So do they remember the advertiser, and what do they associate the advertiser with based on this advertising? And we can do that basically to predict how successful the campaign will be. And we've studied that over many, many years. And there's a very close correlation between the emotion, as you're seeing on the screen here, that gets created, and actually how much gets sold. So, the sort of simple mantra is, the more you feel about a brand, the more likely you are to buy the brand. So that's why we get so obsessed about creating emotion in advertising, and its importance for any business to be successful, really.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm hearing a lot of recurring themes, right? I'm hearing about humor. I'm hearing about celebrity. I'm hearing emotion. One thing that's also coming to mind, especially with a Sesame Street ad, is nostalgia. I wonder if you can bring us home. I think we have 1 minute, but maybe wrap it up by letting us know kind of how nostalgia really plays in with consumers.
Oh, nostalgia is huge, and it's almost one of those kind of underappreciated bits of marketing. And I think people like me that work in advertising, we're so keen to work on the new thing and break new ground. But actually, what we find is that familiarity actually breeds contentment with people. So as so much in our lives are changing. I mean, the last couple of years, of course, have been full of the kind of very big changes. And what we find very consistently in our testing is that familiar characters, familiar scenes, familiar soundtracks all evoke very positive emotions of the past and nostalgia. So, far from being kind of old fashioned, actually what you find is that using familiar characters from our childhood, like DoorDash did incredibly well, is actually very comforting, and it's very positive. So it may not necessarily win you an industry award for being super cutting edge, but it certainly makes viewers very happy, and making viewers happy, of course, is in this case what counts. So yeah, nostalgia is definitely a good thing in this context.
Well, this was incredibly insightful. I learned a lot. I feel like I'm going to have a lot of things in my mind as I watch the game this Sunday and focus in on the ads. John, thank you so much for your time today. It's a pleasure to see you as always.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Okay, and I'm going to kick it to Anne Christine Diaz for our next panel.
Hey everybody, I'm Anne Christine Diaz. I'm the creativity editor at Ad Age, and thank you so much for joining us for this very exciting next panel. We're doing a directors roundtable for 3 talents who have directed big spots for the game this year. We have Jake Szymanski of Gifted Youth, Joshua Kissy of Division 7, and Chloe Zhao, who's represented for spots out of Superprime, and who perhaps is best known as the Oscar-winning director of Nomadland. And for the Marvel fans out there, more recently, the film Eternals. So we're so honored to have all of you with us here today. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you today?
Hi.
I'm so excited about this, you guys. Thank you so much. So I want to kick it off with the topic of comedy, which is, as we know, a staple of the big game. So let's start with you, Jake. I want to play a little bit of the teaser of your spot for Uber Eats. Can we bring that up?
Lipstick? Lipstick delivered with Uber Eats? Oh, it tastes like purple. Yes. I love this.
So we don't want to spoil it for you. You can watch the spot anywhere and also on our site. So comedy, it's such a huge thing. And Jake, you were at the Super Bowl last year as well with the GM spot with Will Ferrell. Let's talk about comedy in the big game. You're a comedy pro. You've done it in all sorts of formats, films, spots. Do you have thoughts on what comedy works on the Super Bowl?
It's tricky. I mean, obviously, like the talent is a big part of it, and obviously what the initial creative is you're going in. But I'm lucky. I for both these Super Bowl spots you mentioned, I just have gotten to work with great people and really talented, funny actors. So they make any idea seem better and do it even better than you think. So I guess that would be my secret, is try to get really funny people to be in the spot.
I mean, you're fortunate to be blessed with, lots of great talents, in the work that you do. What about drawing comedy out of, normal or everyday people, non-actors? And do you have any thoughts about how to get the best performances there?
I kind of come from the school. I got my start kind of working under Will Ferrell and Adam McKay. They had a comedy website, Funny or Die, back in the day. And so I kind of come from their school when they were making their comedies of like, I like to keep it pretty loose and keep the vibe on set light, know what you're getting done. And I like to let the actors play around and try other things. And even if it's not the other things that make it in the final spot, I feel like often there's a looseness to the performance or that freedom that comes and really adds to what you're trying to get. So I let people play a lot. I do long takes. I keep rolling. I don't like to cut and break up the flow of energy with a lot of cuts and resets if we're really working it out.
So do you have any interesting anecdotes from the set of Uber Eats with the talent?
I mean, I think our biggest thing was we have a lot of specialty props and things that are supposed to be edible that we either made actual edible versions of things that look like a prop, or we just had people eating things that weren't edible. So I don't have any specifics. I have a lot. I don't want to give anything away, but we had a lot of fun with what was real food and what was not real food.
So the makeup brush, was that real food?
That was real hair. The lipstick was food, but the makeup brush was just hair. She used a pro though. She went for it.
Yeah, that was a crunchy sounding tube of lipstick. So Joshua, Chloe, do you guys have? I know comedy isn't necessarily your forte, but do you have thoughts on what makes good comedy?
Please, guys, please.
I feel like everyday life, nuance. Look at that. Or the.
Wait, are you guys hearing the feedback?
Yeah.
Okay. Josh, I think you need to take the earphones off. They're testing us to say take the earphones off. I think that's what's getting some.
Thank you, Cliff. Like a good director.
What about now?
Oh, actually, it's still feedbacky. Chloe, do you want to jump in for a second? Well,
no, Josh, we'll try again.
What about now?
You're like the voice of
clear, but it is a very
okay.
This is actually comedy right here. This moment.
This is hilarious. Oh my god! I'm like, why? Okay.
Okay, so Chloe, let's go to your thoughts about comedy. Well,
spontaneous.
Yeah.
Things like that. Keep rolling. Make sure you caught that. What just happened?
Yeah. So I guess let's move from that to big storytelling. So the Super Bowl is known as a forum for huge, big storytelling, all the way back to Ridley Scott and the 1984 Super Bowl spot. And I think, Chloe, your Budweiser ad is a good example of big storytelling. That was a super dramatic spot involving animals and talent. Let's take a little bit of a peek at that. So yeah, a big game advertiser, Budweiser. So what were some of the considerations that went into your storytelling for this, Chloe? We saw a lot of elements there. There's talent, there's drama, there's the land, and animals. You know, what did you set out to convey with that?
Well, I thought Vayner did such an incredible job coming up with me with the pitch. You know, they did a lot of the work, and I was really drawn to the story because there was no dialogue, and I was very intrigued about maybe finding a way to convey a unifying emotion that doesn't have dialogue or language that might, divide us in some way because what we understand or we think it means this or that. The idea of animals, so we all love our pups because they speak the same language. Doesn't matter where you are in the world. So that was really exciting and challenging. How do you tell this story and emotionally keep the audience without a voiceover? So that was a big part of it. And the other one for me is immersion. You know, when you don't have a voiceover, you have to be as immersive as possible. And the idea of trying to get the audience to be immersed in the emotions of the Clydesdales was also something we everything from planning how to shoot it to editing, that was something we discussed a lot.
Where did you actually shoot that? Was it a familiar location to you? Was it a whole new place?
I feel like a lot of people shoot there in California. It's Tahoe Ranch. It's like if you want California to look like Montana, this is where you go.
So that, that's a story told in 30/60 seconds. But your main forum has been long format. What were the challenges like in telling a story in such a short time frame? All of you actually have done this, have worked in different lengths. But yeah, for you, Chloe first, what was the challenge?
Well, I think what Jake and Josh, what you guys do are so much harder. It's so much harder to boil down a story, an impactful story, in the bare minimum within a minute. It's much easier to do a feature, to tell a story. So it's hard. Like every day I'm like tearing my hair out. How do you do this in 1 minute? And then to then have the discipline and I think I learned so much in doing this that I'm going to take back into my feature filmmaking and realizing some of the mistake I've made in the past, making features, like complicating things where this is about you got to put it through a crucible or something. I just get the essence. And that's so difficult to do. So I think they are better to speak on that.
Well, what was one of the biggest things you learned in that? Like, what's one thing that you'll take?
Well, in the script stage, you have to have the discipline to narrow it down and to do a lot of soul searching. Like, what is the most important thing? Because you also only have 3 days, 2 days, 4 days to shoot it. And you want to make sure you don't let your ambition get in the way, and then keep it really simple. And then have the courage to in the edit to keep it simple and believe your audience is going to get it. That's a lot of guts that you need to do commercials. It's scary mentally.
Yeah. Wait, so Joshua, Jake, what are your thoughts on telling us a concise story?
I'm gonna let Joshua go. He's back with the mic.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm back to live. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Jake and Chloe. I think it's one of those things where you go into it and you try to think what best serves the story. But at the same time, there's so many different parties between the agency and the client to be able to get that. And I feel like you're just a co-captain, right? So I'm just like, how do we share this story collectively, and what best serves that, to me, is always the right answer over, one perspectives that may take us to left and another perspectives that may take us to right. So for me, I'm always trying to think through, like, what are the vantage points from these different parties and how do I mix that into my artistic vision without letting that go. So it's always a tricky ship. I feel like you're like a politician on set sometimes, because you're trying to think through all these different perspectives and how to bring out a collective voice and still have it say something important. So for me, I just try to ground myself in people, the crew, everybody around me, but still try to protect the artistic vision as well. So it's a balancing, it's a dance. It's a dance.
Jake, do you have anything to add to that?
I agree with what everyone else has already said, and it's tricky for me sometimes. The way I approach, especially if it's comedy dialogue, is I'm not afraid of options. You know what I mean? So like I'll get many alts and take it into the edit room, because the way you put it together can change or surprise you. So I try to keep it balanced there, but that can be tricky because I think what Chloe said is really accurate. Like it actually is. Sometimes you're like, well, look, I only have 30 seconds. So what is going to be the one reaction I see, or the one shot I'm going to end this on? Whereas when I'm making something longer, like a feature in TV, I might play around and go, I'll figure it out for the edit, and let me get this, and we can sit in it a little longer. But you can't do that in a commercial. So it does kind of force you to make some choices that's good to do sometimes, and that you can take in other things. I agree with all that.
So I wanted to talk about creating impact with today's viewers. There's so many places where you need to capture viewers' attention, and so many formats. I want to turn to you, Joshua. You directed, or you were involved in Google's Super Bowl ad, which we can't talk about because that hasn't been unveiled yet. But you started out as a photographer. You know the power of an image. The quiet image is not necessarily the sort of thing that will capture Super Bowl viewers' attention, or traditionally has. So what are your thoughts about, or actually, let's take a quick look at a piece of work that you did for the New York Times.
Sure.
We call that up. Anyway, I don't know why.
Not the surfing one you did. Wow.
Yeah. But let's talk about your thoughts on that.
On just the Super Bowl in general and creating work for it?
Oh no, what captures an audience's attention today, in terms of with imagery, for example, with striking imagery.
I think all imagery has the potential to tell a story, and for me, thinking about America, right? Like I'm born and raised in the Bronx, but I'm from Ghana originally. Like my path to what America looks like is very different from being in Middle America or being in the Pacific Northwest. So I try to think through like how do I make sure we convey a message that everybody could be able to take something away from it, where I'm not providing the answer, but I'm asking the question and informing people to do the same, and trusting viewers to kind of complete the answer within their own perspective. So a lot of the work I do is based around people, and I feel like people are so nuanced and people have their own stories. And I try to think through not shouting in a room or not being an echo chamber, but like the work I put out there hopefully inspires somebody or makes somebody think different about what storytelling is look like, especially from the West, especially from that perspective. Because I feel like in the West is all about like us. It's a very like, egocentric perspective on how we look at storytelling. Is me, the idea starts with me, it's all about me. Like that's how we kind of perceive, the world. So for me, is always thinking through, my West African roots, and thinking through like, how do we collectively tell a story that shares itself, right? Instead of ownership, what do you look like from community communication when it comes to these pieces? So whenever I'm telling a story, especially for the Super Bowl, because the audience is so diverse and it's people all over the nation, I try to think through what can I say collectively that informs people that probably thought something and now that's changed because they saw this spot or saw this story. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Unfortunately, we have very little time left. So I wanted to try to see, to hear your favorite Super Bowl ads. Do you guys have a favorite Super Bowl spot? Chloe?
I haven't seen a lot, but I really like the one with the Darth Vader kid.
Yeah.
And the frogs as well. I like the funny ones.
Jake, what about you?
Oh, I can't. It's too hard. I do like a lot of them. I'm looking forward to seeing these two guys' ones from this year. That's what I got my hopes pinned on.
Okay, Joshua.
I feel like Budweiser do a good job at like in Burger King and a couple other brands that I've seen year to year, and just be like, oh wow, they're doing something new, especially when it's expected. So I think they've done a good job of refreshing the palette of what people expect on their Super Bowl.
Cool. Well, if all of you want to check out their spots, make sure to go to adage.com. We'll have all of them there. They're really fantastic. And also watch their other stuff, like the stuff that won Oscars and everything.
Not here yet. Hopefully.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to quick say, thanks for having me on this panel. And directors never really, directors don't get to be on other directors' sets, so you never really get to meet each other. So I just want to say it's so nice meeting you guys. I'm such fans of your work. It was nice to see you guys on this panel.
Same here.
Likewise.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Appreciate it. Bye.
Okay, that's it for now. And I guess we will move to our next panel. And make sure to tune into adage.com/Super Bowl for more of the work. And next up, I will throw it to John Dioso.
Thanks, Anne. Wow, how do you follow up Oscar winners? That was really cool. I'm John Dioso, editor of Ad Age Studio 30. At an estimated cost of $6.5 million for $6.5 million for a 30-second spot, big game advertisers like TurboTax have to make sure that every single dollar counts. To do so, many are turning to YouTube and AdBlitz to extend the reach of their Super Bowl ads. Joining me to discuss the new sports playbook for the streaming era are Danielle Rourke, marketing brand lead at TurboTax, and Sadie Tama, Director of U.S. Creative Business Development at Google. Welcome, guys.
Hi. Hi.
Hey, nice to see you. Wow, look at those gorgeous backdrops. What am I doing wrong? That's the first question, but we don't have time for that. So let's get into it. According to eMarketer, the number of U.S. digital live sports viewers will reach 57.5 million this year, and that's expected to exceed 90 million in 2025, which is a projected increase of 26%. Sadie, what do you think is driving the shift in terms of consuming sports content digitally?
Well, first of all, it's great to be here and I'm excited for this conversation. I would say over the past 2 years, especially during the pandemic, digital consumption overall has risen to all-time highs. People want to watch what they want, when they want, how and where they want. And so that is especially true when it comes to sports. So whether it's live games, fans are watching with the option to pause and rewind for their favorite plays, or you can, of course, record for later if no one spoils it before you've watched the game. But beyond the game itself, there's so much great content than ever to choose from. So particularly on YouTube, what we're seeing is just such an influx of interesting additional sports related content. So highlights from the game, analysis, trivia, bloopers, hearing from the athletes themselves. It's just, there's a lot of fun, engaging, interesting content. So it's really not a surprise that sports fans are diving in deeper. And, as the NFL and athletes and influencers and beyond are coming up with interesting, fresh ways to engage fans, of course, those numbers will continue to rise.
And Danielle, the TurboTax, this is your ninth consecutive Super Bowl as an in-game advertiser. As a brand that regularly invests in the game, how are you thinking about the digital shift and how people consume content when it comes to your marketing? And, what do you think that other advertisers are missing out by not also boosting the digital presence as you have?
Sure. And thanks for having me, John. I'll tell you, it's not easy. We're constantly looking at viewership consumption patterns in a very fragmented landscape that's just rapidly changing all the time. And so with increased viewership on connected TVs and connected devices, which is replacing declines on linear TV, we're really shifting a lot of our investment into digital channels, including OTT, FEP, and even social. We're able to engage consumers in all the different places and all the different screens where they're watching video. It's just become more important than ever to really pay attention to, where consumers are participating so that you could meet them where they are. And, I think advertisers that don't boost their digital presence really miss out on the incremental reach to their linear buy, as well as reaching the
elusive Gen Z audience who are making up more of the cord cutters and cord neverers audience today?
According to a recent study that I just saw, at 43% of the people who watch the Super Bowl are actually primarily watching it for the ads, which is great for you, I guess. And to address this, TurboTax created 5 different ads as part of Ad Blitz surrounding last year's game. Why was this approach important for you to reach your audience?
Well, actually, by publishing 5 different ads, we were able to deliver a much more comprehensive campaign message on a platform where consumers are really leaned into the creative. They're going there to see what's coming up and just really participate in it outside of the game itself. And so that was really a great insight for us to be able to do that and have just a richer presence and way to deliver our message. We could also test different formats and get a feel for what type of creative messaging resonated most with consumers. And we're able to get just about real-time data on that.
Can we take a look, producers, can you bring up that Ad Blitz screen just so people can see what we're talking about? There it is. What are we looking at here? Sadie, do you want to walk us through or?
Sure. I mean, this is our promo for Ad Blitz. So youtube.com/Ad Blitz has all of the Super Bowl ads. And actually, I would say also ads that are not running actually in the game, but are surrounding Super Bowl. So, this is our hub. We've had it for 16 years going now. And advertisers and marketers such as TurboTax are putting their work there, their teasers, their ads, and much more. So you can check it out even today. There's a ton of work that's already being teased and already being released for the game on Sunday. So
it's a great way. It's a great way for people like me to do their homework too.
Me too.
So Danielle, were there any learnings from last year's campaign that influenced what you're doing in this year's ad?
Absolutely. So last year, TurboTax became the #1 most viewed ad in financial services, and we actually increased subscribers by 10%. And so we'll take a similar approach again this year with having multiple creative up on Ad Blitz. And this year we'll showcase multiple unique and culturally relevant tax situations like crypto investing, investor income, to really reinforce our campaign message that there's no tax situation our tax experts can't handle.
So speaking of this year's ad, can you spoil anything? Are you going to give us any teasers?
Well, I can tell you that it will be within the same DNA as our brand campaign, which launched earlier this year and celebrates the people's interesting and unique lives. And as a matter of fact, we just launched our Super Bowl teaser spot featuring my favorite actor, Jason Sudeikis, which you can go onto YouTube's Ad Blitz to watch starting today.
And awesome. And I'm sure you'll be able to read about it on age.com later today. Sadie, can you talk about some of the sports viewing trends that you're seeing on YouTube with connected TV? Are people actually using YouTube on their regular TVs to watch their favorite ads?
Yes. So there's actually a recent study that showed 74% of people interested in sports are visiting YouTube several times a week. So they're not, by the way, just watching on their laptops or on their mobile devices, because we know the living room and the living room screen and connected TV, it's one of the fastest growing screens. So connected TV is an opportunity to obviously watch on the big screen with more flexibility with digital. And
did Sadie freeze out, or was that me? Do we have any technical difficulties here? All right, well, we'll wait for Sadie to come back. And in the meantime, let's see if we can.
Hi.
There you are. Hey, where'd you go?
Did you lose me? Was I just talking to myself?
Are you not hardwired into Google's servers? I mean, what's happening over there?
Yeah, I thought it was. Where did you
Check your
lose me?
Ethernet, Google.
All right. Okay, well, we're back. So I was essentially just saying that, one of the biggest trends we see with people watching YouTube on connected TV is that people are often watching together, which makes sense because, when you're watching on connected TV, you're in your living room, you're with other people for the most part. So we also see that behavior, of course, with the Super Bowl. We have a recent survey that showed that about 80% of viewers achieved deeper connections when they watched YouTube with others, which means that people are more engaged, they're more leaned in when they're together. And so that obviously in turn helps advertisers as well. And so we think about Super Bowl ads, they're talk-worthy ads. So YouTube plus connected TV in the living room when you're sitting with everyone, it's really a perfect setting to do some, couch analysis on the game and on the ads.
Could you tell us a little bit about, there's this trend now recently of athletes who are turning into creators. How does that impact how people consume sports content?
Yes, well, YouTube's mission is to give everyone a voice and show them the world. So athletes are bringing us into their worlds. They're showing us what life is like on the field and off the field. And they really want to connect with their fans directly, as we see from other influencers. So, for example, Rob Gronkowski of Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
He's still playing?
No, well, we don't know. Do we know? I know Tom Brady's not, but I don't know about if he's announced anything yet.
We'll never get rid of those guys. Sorry, Giants fan.
Me too. But Gronk has a big family. And so him and his brothers, who, by the way, also have been professional athletes, they started a channel on YouTube called The Gronks. And they're really close as a family. So they're showing people what life is like for them as a family. They have all these shenanigans and fun things they do together. They started their channel at the height of the pandemic 2 years ago or so. They have about 8 million views. And it also they actually do have a Super Bowl ad. It's Gronk and Groupon coming together. So that's also attracted, a brand to come join forces. But YouTube is a place where people lean in to connect with the influencers, athletes, other people that they love. And there's an authenticity there to understand and learn more about, those people. And so we're seeing more content like that, create athletes that are creators, or NFL is publishing some really interesting exclusive content now too. They have nearly 9 million subscribers. So they're giving access to, content beyond the game. And also some funny stuff like NFL Follies is all the bloopers that take place either by the commentators or on the field. And it's hilarious. So we're seeing a lot of interesting ways to connect in authentic ways more deeply.
All right. Now, Danielle, back to the brand side of the big game. As I said in the intro, it cost about $6.5 million for a 30-second spot during the game. Obviously, that's because there are so many people watching. But as you know, they only get to watch your ad once. So how do you make sure that they engage in the campaign before and afterwards? And then how do you make sure that you get the ROI from an investment like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I will say, our strategy doesn't start and end with the spot that's in the game. We actually take a 360-degree, fully integrated approach to our Super Bowl campaign. And it starts in the weeks leading up to the game and actually continues for a few weeks after. And it's really this holistic, cross-platform integrated approach that's key to delivering maximum ROI with our campaign investment. And so, as an example, we have a very deliberate PR rollout, we have a social amplification strategy, and many brand partnerships and digital activations that tap into the excitement around the game, the halftime performances, and even the commercials to really extend the runway and that campaign idea beyond just the in-game TV spot.
Sadie, any last thoughts on how YouTube can help brands extend the life? Back to leaning on what Danielle just said, how YouTube can help brands extend the life of their Super Bowl ad campaign.
Yes, well, some people obviously tune in on Sunday and for Super Bowl for the game. Some people tune in for the halftime show. Some people tune in for the ads. And what we see is that marketers are going all out, as we know, for the ads. And really, you want to extend beyond that 30-second live showing. So more and more, we're seeing teasers this rolling thunder, this anticipation and hype to extend the life of that work. And as I mentioned briefly earlier, AdBlitz is where we on YouTube have created this destination so that marketers can start to put those teasers out. They can start to get that excitement generated. And we also have seen that there was a survey about 72% of people that are interested in sports rewatch those football ads before and after the game. So you want to make sure that you have your ads somewhere, a destination where people can revisit them if they see them during the game and they want to watch them again or share them or talk more about them. That's really what we've set up there. And I will say already on AdBlitz now, Danielle mentioned the TurboTax Sudeikis teaser. There's a ton of other work that's already been up. In a lot of celebrities showing up again this year. So we've got Idris Elba for Booking.com, Amazon's using Scarlett Johansson and Colin Yost, Hyundai and Jason Bateman, Squarespace and Zendaya, and Google we've just put our teaser up today, and you'll see Lizzo. So lots of great stuff, lots of excitement that's brewing, and a great opportunity to extend the life of these great ads beyond just the moments in the game.
Well, unfortunately, we're at time. It's such a great discussion. Thank you so much for joining me today, Danielle and Sadie. One more spoiler, Danielle, does he have a mustache? No.
Well, that's
All right. Thank you so much for joining me. And let me throw it back to Janine Poggi.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. So we are looking for laughs next. And as we near the 2-year anniversary of the start of COVID lockdowns and following the recent surge in the Omicron variant, more than ever, Super Bowl advertisers are looking to entertain and uplift Super Bowl fans. Of the ads that we've seen pre-release so far, the majority are lighthearted, celebrity-filled spots that are really meant to distract from real-world fatigue. But striking the right tone and making sure jokes don't fall flat or even worse, provoke controversy is no easy feat. Joining me now to discuss just what it takes to make people laugh in the Super Bowl, we have Joe Shoesmith, Executive Director of Global Creative at Amazon, Allison Witherspoon, VP and Chief Marketing Officer at Nissan US, and Mike Pirantozzi, Executive Creative Director at VaynerMedia. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us. I'm loving the background over there, Allison.
Thank you.
I don't know
these things.
I don't know about all of you, but I could certainly need a laugh. So I'm looking forward to talking about the creative and what we expect to see on Super Bowl Sunday.
We were saying in the green room, we didn't know we were bringing product.
There's always an opportunity.
I could have put a can of Planters behind me, but I didn't know we were bringing product.
Oh, Mike, I see some cute pictures back there. So also.
Exactly.
So, Allison, I wanted to start with you. Nissan is returning to the game for the first time since 2015 with a fake movie of sorts starring Eugene Levy. It's a very different tone than what Nissan took in the last Super Bowl commercial. That one was celebrating dads. Can you talk us through this year's concept, why you went for a more lighthearted approach?
Yeah, I think this year what we wanted to focus on, and Nissan, we don't get into the Super Bowl every year. It's not something that we are always advertising in. So the last time we were in the Super Bowl was 7 years ago. For this year, I think we definitely wanted to take a more lighthearted and humorous approach. We wanted to tell a transformation story, but we wanted to tell that through the use of humor. And I think the reasons for that are, one, we know that humor works really well in the Super Bowl. Those humorous ads tend to perform very well. I think the other thing, too, is that between COVID and supply chain shortage and the ongoing fatigue that all consumers are feeling, it's important to be lighthearted and to make people smile, especially in a moment like Super Bowl.
Yeah, let's take a look at the spot. I think we have that. Or not.
Nice ride.
Want to give it a spin?
Coffee's enough excitement for me.
Come on.
Very nice. Catherine?
What the? Hey, hey.
All right.
Is that Eugene Levy? Eugene.
Where is he?
Where are you?
I'll be there in 2 seconds. Well, cock-a-doodle-doo. Send him. Watch the coffee.
I'll drive. Shotgun.
Love it.
So similarly, Amazon is also taking more of a lighthearted approach, spoofing sort of what people have feared about some smart devices for some time, that they hear so much of what you are saying that they can practically read your mind. And we have a clip of that also.
Check this out. Alexa, it's game day.
Streaming football on Prime Video. Closing blinds. Chilling rosé. Rosé?
Well, it's an afternoon game.
It's like she can read your mind. Your mind. I love that we get to sleep in. Ordering fresh mint mouthwash. Extra strength.
I was thinking I should get a spray tan, you know, because that's on Wednesday.
Activating blender.
Funeral's on Monday.
Joe, how did this idea come about?
Well, it's definitely the continuation of a successful series that we've had with Alexa, where we really laugh at ourselves and make fun of these fails. And so starting with Alexa losing her voice, and then Alexa being put into things that she didn't belong in. And then last year when we put Alexa into the sexy body of Michael B. Jordan, and now having her read your mind, it's an opportunity for us to let technology lead the ideas when this functionality of routines is amazing with Alexa, but have fun with ourselves and laugh at ourselves and give people that kind of collective laugh that I think they really crave in Super Bowl, especially in a moment like this when we haven't had a lot of opportunities to laugh.
VaynerMedia is working on 2 Super Bowl ads this year. One is a more lighthearted one for DraftKings, and another a more sentimental one for Budweiser that features the iconic Clydesdale's dog combo. Mike, what are the challenges that come with executing a humorous spot?
Yeah, I think you have to be sensitive to who you're talking to, right? So it's a humongous audience, 106 million people. They are all sitting in their rooms. They're waiting. They're in this great situation where they're all like getting ready for these commercials, and you have to nail it, right? So I think when you're talking about a spot, you have to start with a great idea, right? The challenge is coming up with a great idea. If you can come up with a great idea first, like Alexa's reading your mind or what's the monster.com thing. When I grow up, if you start with a great idea, the script itself, comes much easier. But you see, I think in a lot of cases that you'll see a spot that the idea isn't really there and they're just going for like the big joke. But I think the challenge really is coming up with the idea first. And our idea for planners actually came out of a poll, which is pretty funny. We actually tested a poll and found out that people ate nuts 2 different ways. They ate them one at a time or all at once. So when we put that poll out and saw people's reactions to that and saw how people reacted, which was in a really funny way, we knew that we had something right there even before we made the spot. So I think the challenge really is like landing that big idea, landing that insightful idea first.
In recent years, has it seemed to be harder to get humor right?
Is that for me?
Mike, you take it, or if anyone else wants to, feel free to jump in.
It is always hard to get humor right, especially with, I think, to your point, such a mass audience. So you have to find those jokes that are going to resonate with everyone. And I mean, we've had a lot of success collaborating with the same people. We've had Wayne McClammy and our partners at Lucky Generals, and we tend to use a similar group that we really trust. And there's a lot of collaborative sessions. And we were really lucky this year with Scarlett and Colin being great contributors to the humor and writing for us. So it's you push it and you're working on the jokes for us right up until the very last minute. So you have to be continually raising the bar to get that humor right.
Allison, what checks are in place to ensure that jokes don't alienate or strike a nerve with viewers?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it's a lot of kind of working through a few different scenarios, a few different versions of the script. On this, we partnered with Bree and with Eugene on some of the actual lines that were in there, along with our agency TVWA Shy Day in New York. And I think the other piece of it, and I know that this can be controversial for advertisers and marketers, but we also did go in and we did consumer research on this just to understand how is this going to resonate when you have an investment like Super Bowl. For us at Nissan, it was important to make sure that we were able to find that right tone and we weren't alienating anyone. So I think it's about a little bit of trialing when you're production, making sure you're getting, internal as well as consumer-based checkpoints. And I think Mike mentioned, the poll, actually, those are great ways to try to get a quick read on an approach.
Yeah.
Yeah, and on the other hand too, like while you don't want to necessarily do something that's controversial, there's also the other side of it where you're potentially playing things too safe or running the risk of like not standing out from the pack, especially in a year where there are so many that are sort of taking that lighthearted approach. Mike, how do you really toe that line?
Yeah, I mean, we always talk about like pushing right up against the controversy a little bit, right? So, I mean, I worked on Killing Mr. Peanut, right? So that happened a couple years ago, which is like as much as controversial as you can get. I think this year, we established something like that, which is like getting into culture, right? What can we do to get into culture? And I think this year we did something a little bit different around this idea of an argument. And I don't know if anybody's noticed, but over the past couple of years, people tend to argue on the internet. And we thought we could have a little fun with that and subvert that just a little bit. So the spot itself is really about pushing up against something, but like tongue planted firmly enough in cheek that I don't think, it was never meant to offend. It was always meant to have a bit of fun. But for me, it's like, if you play it too safe, you're going to end up in the middle of the pack. And I don't think anybody does that and wants to do that. Right. So I think you do have to like turn the crank a little bit, but over the past couple of years, it's been hard. Right.
Yeah. Cause I think it's the challenge is how are you bold? Because you have to be somewhat bold. Actually, you have to be a lot bold in order to stand out. But how do you do that in a way that isn't going to alienate, because you do have that massive audience and it's all happening at the same time.
Absolutely.
And, you brought up the social media aspect. How do you do that on social as well? We've seen a lot of brands recently get into some hot water over certain tweets and things like that. The Super Bowl is probably the most active day for brands on Twitter, where they're talking to consumers, or even talking to each other. How do you make sure that that same tone translates from what you're doing on TV into what you're doing on like digital offshoots?
I think for me, as you said, it's the heart of it is a really big idea. In the great ads have a big idea, and then how you translate that appropriately for the channels. So last year when we had Michael B. Jordan, we started a feud with Kevin Hart in the social space, and so that was something that we picked up by looking at how much he was working out and looking at his body. And then this year, as we look to who else's minds would we like to read, you're going to start seeing Mindy Kaling, RuPaul, a bunch of different celebrities pop up in social having their minds read. So if you've got that central idea, you can then blow it out in a way that's really appropriate for each channel.
Right. And I think because our idea is grounded in an internet debate, or how people debate silly things on the internet, like which side of the toilet paper do you use. It was actually, the idea was built in social and kind of grew into a Super Bowl commercial, which is a very Vayner thing, but it really started. I don't know if there's ever been an ad inspired by a Twitter poll. So,
and both Nissan and Amazon, you're both tapping high-profile celebrities for the spots, Eugene Levy, among others. Amazon also has Scarlett Johansson. How important are celebrities at creating entertainment and really building that buzz?
I mean, I think it's, for us, I don't think it's necessarily a requirement when it comes to Super Bowl advertising. I do think that if you pick the right one, and if you pick kind of the right chemistry, I do think that it can really help piece together everything, and especially if it's the right type of talent that you're using to tell that story. I think for us, Eugene Levy is obviously a beloved figure, and I think he's 100% believable in this kind of transformation story. And I think people are interested, from what we've seen from the teasers and then the reveal of the full spot. they like to see him in an unexpected way.
Yeah, I think for us,
why did Abigail go with Scarlett Johansson?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it was, as I said, we tend to laugh at ourselves in Super Bowl ads, and we needed a couple that were really comfortable laughing at themselves as well. And there was that added intrigue of people don't know that much about them as a couple. They're not overexposed. So I think that's created a lot of buzz around seeing that inside a window into their relationship and a couple that can really laugh at themselves, which I think can be really disarming.
Yeah. And our couple as well, which is Joel McHale and Ken Jeong, who are known to be best friends, who often bicker, felt like the right pair. I don't think we could have found a better pairing of two people that would just argue without a script, just go at it for hours and hours and hours. That gave us tons of great stuff.
And, given the uncertainty, among the recent COVID surge, I'm curious what the process was like to create a Super Bowl ad this year. Was there any concern during the creation that whether the tone of the ad would still resonate come February 13th? What are sort of the contingencies in place to prepare for something like that? Mike, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, the funny thing about this year, I think, and even the last couple of years, like especially with COVID, you brands like to get way out in front of it, and you really couldn't do it this year, right? Because even next week, what are going to be people going to be thinking next week, right? So, what we really did is we tried to focus on the product because the product is consistent, right? It's still going to be mixed nuts on February 13th, regardless of what's going on in the world. And if we could find a humorous insight around the product itself and build on that, we felt we were protecting ourselves from, anything that was going on because we had this constant, which was in fact the product. So for us, it was that. And I think we were still able to kind of have a little fun with debates and controversy, which is stuff that's going on in the world. But we felt it was, like I said before, pushing up against it. We felt we had an idea that wasn't going to offend, for the reasons that things were going on in the world, right?
Allison, do you think the Nissan's approach was sort of evergreen in the place that it could sort of live no matter what was going on, in the environment around us?
Yeah, and I think that was something that was really specific and why I leaned heavily into this concept when I first saw it, because I think depending on what was happening around us, this concept would still work. And I think that's why we very much deliberately took a more humorous, lighthearted approach to it. You obviously get into production, gymnastics, and things like that. And how do you have that around, with all the COVID protocols, but you work through those. And I think, Mike mentioned it as well. We're so used to this by now, we go forward, we know that we may need to adapt. So always have a little level of flexibility. But I felt that this concept would work regardless of what was going on in the external environment.
Joe, did Amazon have to pivot at all or change strategy at all? Or how was the approach, this year amid some of the surge and production?
And the continuation of this story was actually, in a way, quite fortunate that our situations take place in homes when we think about these Alexa fails. So it got us around any of those having to create large scenes or things that might have been seen as a bit tone deaf for the moment in time. So it felt like a really natural continuation and kept us in a pretty contained environment for the spot to play out in.
Mike, what types of humor do you think Super Bowl viewers are really looking for in 2022?
Sorry, that was a little. Could you say that one more time? It's just a little garbled.
Yeah, what type of humor do you think that Super Bowl fans are really looking for in 2022?
Talking about this with one of my colleagues. I said one of my Clydesdales. One of my colleagues earlier. I think that people really like insightful humor, right? Like I was saying before, at least for us, we have this very captive audience that's sitting on their couch, eating snacks. It's the biggest snack day of the year. How can you not just make them laugh, but make them think or make them get involved with the idea itself? I'm a fan of slapstick, and I think maybe that's going to come back. Maybe that's the thing that will come back next year. But for us, and I think on all the folks on the panel, having a great insight at the center of it, and drawing humor from that insight that everybody can get, but it's unexpected, right? So finding an insight that everyone goes, oh yeah, that's me, that's my family, but it comes from an angle that's unexpected. I think that's the stuff that at least in my favorite spots, that's the stuff that generally lands with me. though I do like a good slapstick thing.
It does feel like, we've evolved beyond some of the bathroom humor, even some of the slapstick. We don't really see that much anymore in, Super Bowl commercials. Like, where are we? What does insightful humor mean? And you run the risk of sort of blending in when you try to be like intelligently smart and funny.
Yeah. I don't know if I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
No, it can't be too much of a cognitive load. I think we talk about that a lot. You want kind of quick read jokes. I think it's okay to be edgy. We talk a lot about where that line is and pushing the jokes as far as we can and really getting there with the humor. I think it is important to play to, you're playing to a pretty big audience. And so there is that, it is a dance of like, you don't want to make it so toned down that it doesn't appeal to people, but we still should all be challenging ourselves to find that line with the jokes and pushing it and make sure the humor is as well delivered and crafted as possible.
We talked about this in an earlier session about like thinking about being diverse and inclusive, no matter what kind of spot you're trying to tell. How are you all thinking about that this year, sort of prioritizing it in your Super Bowl efforts?
I can go on this. I think for us, kind of thinking about inclusivity isn't just solely about Super Bowl for us. I think we took a lot of major steps over the last year to make sure that whether it's looking at who are the media partners that we're working with, who are the production partners, casting, I think is, that's been a given for a long time now. I think these are all things that we very much look at. How are we going to make sure we're inclusive in our overall production? We have a partnership with our agency, BWA, about extending the line and making sure that we're able to have BIPOC representation and actually adding additional support people that can learn from people that are actually on the crew. And I think it's important to give that type of exposure to people that may not have necessarily had that exposure or visibility in the past.
Yeah, I echo that. The people that are making the ad as well, making sure that representation is in every part of the process, and also thinking about your body of work throughout the entire year. When I think about Alexa, Super Bowl is one moment for us, but Alexa, we have so many moments of inclusivity, and the product, it's built into the product itself, accessibility stories, and we're about to launch another spot with a hard of hearing person, and an elderly person with dementia was in one of our recent spots, and showing how Alexa can enable their life and improve their quality of life. So it's something that's just a constant process for us. It's something where we have panels internally. We're always gut checking, making sure that we're scrutinizing the diversity and inclusion aspects of all of our work.
Mike, how are you thinking about inclusivity, both in front of and behind the camera?
Everything that was just said before, whether it's the production, the casting, who is working on the projects. I mean, I think inclusivity is deeply ingrained in intermedia and Gary's philosophy. And I think the idea itself is quite inclusive. Like, it's really inviting everybody to participate in the idea. So, whether it's the production or the folks that are working on it, or the idea itself, the whole intent was to bring everybody in.
Right. And I can't let you all leave without asking this question. What do you think was the funniest Super Bowl commercial of all time, or some of your favorites at least?
It's a really hard question, isn't it? I think for me, I always loved the Force, the VW ad, and I loved how charming and simple, and the humor to me was in the charm of that. It was just such a lovely, simple story. So yeah, that's one I always kind of go back to when I think about my favorites.
The one for me was Apple's 1984. I think it definitely had a different approach, but I think it actually changed Super Bowl advertising, and I think that ad alone turned it into this Super Bowl of advertisers, actually. So that to me that's my favorite, my most memorable. Not lighthearted, obviously, but I think to me most iconic. I also love the Clydesdales.
For me, it's two Tide ads for two different reasons. I love the talking stain Tide ad. It was such a simple idea. And it was about the product, right? It's Tide saying the same thing that we always say, which is like, we get stains out. And when you have a stain on your shirt, it says something about you, and having the stain talk. So like, dead simple, great 30-second spot. And then I think it's a Tide ad. kind of changed the way that people advertise. Probably the best, whatever 360 campaign done on the Super Bowl, and set a new standard of like how people subvert the Super Bowl itself and bring people in to participate in the idea. So those two things. Those two ties in. I also like the dancing monkeys, which is another as well. I haven't tried, but those are my three of my number ones.
Well, thank you so much, Allison, Mike, and Joe. We appreciate you being here and looking forward to seeing more on Super Bowl Sunday.
Thank you so much. It was great being with y'all.
Yes, ditto.
Bye-bye.
All right, we're going to move over to our last panel. Even as Super Bowl advertisers, continue to lean on the tried and true tactics like tapping big name celebrities and bringing back some classic movie IP, this year's big game marketing is also poised to look a bit different thanks to some new forms of innovation. NFTs will be making a cameo in a Super Bowl spot, and at least several Super Bowl commercials will reference the metaverse. Up next, we'll take a look at how things like virtual worlds and cryptocurrency are invading the big game and what it means for Super Bowl advertising moving forward. Joining me right now is Spencer Gordon, VP of Digital and Draftline at Anheuser-Busch, Yvonne Kinzer, VP of Marketing and Innovation at Avocados for Mexico, Vicky McRae, VP of Brands and Creative at Rakuten, and Sina Nader, Head of Partnerships at FTX. Hello, everyone.
Hi. Hello, how's it going?
Good afternoon.
We are here to talk about probably one of the ads world's most hyped and excited topics of conversation these days, between things like cryptocurrency and NFTs in the metaverse. I feel like that's all we're hearing about from a lot of brands these days. There's a lot of attention and media surely being paid to it, but it also seems to be moving into the Super Bowl landscape, and all of you are touching on and looking at these forms of innovation in some way during this year's game. Sina, I really want to start with you. Cryptocurrency is looking to make a big Super Bowl debut in a big way this year. FTX is at least one of 3 crypto brands that will air a commercial in the game. How does crypto fit into the Super Bowl? Why now? Why the Super Bowl?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation with you all. Look, I mean, crypto is having its sort of coming out moment. People are talking about it everywhere, and hearing about it at, just talking with your friends, walking down the street, if people still do that, and just everywhere you look, people are talking about crypto. So, crypto trying to go mainstream and sort of having its mainstream moment, I think it's the perfect time to sort of blend that with the Super Bowl, because the Super Bowl is also exactly that, right? I mean, it is when everybody's looking and sort of paying attention to something that they're interested in, and this is like the perfect time to talk about all of that, we think.
How will FTX look to show up in the game?
So we're running a spot. It's going to be a 60-second spot, and we're looking to engage with people and basically let them know that we're here, and come get to know us, and that we don't take ourselves too seriously, and at the same time we do a pretty serious business, and we're talking about the future of finance and technology, and so it's sort of a combination of, hey, come get to know us, and hopefully you'll see that we're a safe and welcoming place to get involved with crypto.
We have a teaser of that spot, actually.
I spent my life trying to make this farm work, and I've missed out on a lot. But I am not going to miss out on this. FTX is giving away the time their ad runs in Bitcoin, and I'm going to win. We're going to win.
So can you talk a little bit about that and, how the idea sort of generated?
Sure. So, I mean, the idea on sort of these teasers is to give people some sense of the way that may be sort of coming at stuff. Really, we want to get people to engage and sort of see the content. And we know that a lot of people are interested in crypto, so we said, why not give away some crypto? And so we're sort of pairing the ad with this sort of campaign before it to let people know that we're going to be giving away a significant amount of Bitcoin, based on some things that people can do as they see the ad run.
the Super Bowl really for as long as, we can think about Super Bowl advertising has really been an awareness play for brands. But with new opportunities around like e-commerce and shoppability, as well as capabilities to connect, Super Bowl creative with the bottom funnel marketing techniques. Yvonne, how are you seeing the role of big game marketing starting to shift this year?
Yeah, that's a great question because actually that is in the center of our strategy this year. Historically, the Super Bowl has been a creative showcase, and historically, brands just leverage the Super Bowl for branding. But the reason that that was the case before is that there was no other way to do it, because if you see TV is at the upper funnel, but what happened is that technology just changed it all, and now we have we use technology to drive creative, and we use technology to drive performance. So if you think about it, for example, in our case, in Avocado from Mexico, in previous years we used technology to drive creative. We have done Super Bowl campaigns where we actually use NFTs before the NFT conversation started in 2020. If you see the curve of NFT popularity, it was flat in 2020, and then it came really high. And at that point, we already have we're playing in that territory, but we also have done campaigns with IBM Watson, for example, et cetera, et cetera. So, but then if you don't remember, last year we didn't participate with a Super Bowl spot because we were kind of reassessing the opportunity. The worst thing that we want to be is that kind of companies and that kind of brands that just do things because they have done it in the past. And when you ask how that shift started to happening, I think that it has been happening like little by little for years, but last year was, I think that it was a pivotal moment for that. Years before, we had already have done experiments with brand and performance. And I give you an example. Years ago, we partnered with a company and a technology platform that helped us to increase our bids in paid search at the moment that the Super Bowls came up. That increased our traffic from paid search in 2,000% within the 2 minutes around the game. What I'm going with all that is that right now the shift is just definitely happening because we can't, because technology is allowing that. So when we came back to the Super Bowl this year, we came with a very progressive approach, which is brandformance. We're going to play in the branding space because that's our main purpose, to build a brand. But we also have a very robust activation leveraging technology. We're making all our branded ads shoppable through a partnership with Micmac. We have a large activation in store. Even our Super Bowl that you are going to see online has a QR code that it is going to take you to a storefront where they can consumers can purchase avocados. We are also playing very hard on paid search, competing with all the terms for Super Bowl snacks, Super Bowl recipes, and we are also having a presence in the retailers.com, Walmart.com, Kroger.com, because we think that it's also important to take advantage of the awareness created by TV to also drive consumers to purchase avocado. And we can do that by being present and have a space for our product in the digital shelf. So this is a time that marketers don't have to see only the big screen, but it's also the totality of the surrounding sound of around the Super Bowl spot.
When we talk about things this year, like the demise of the third-party cookie, could the Super Bowl present like new opportunities even around data collection?
Absolutely. We have been also very, very serious about building our first-party data since 2016. We have right now 100 million IDs in our CDP, in our consumer data platform. And this in the Super Bowl, we took a step forward again through our partnership with technology partners like Micmac, LiveRamp, for example. We are going to collect more data, enrich our current data, but also make our data stronger by identifying the demographics and psychographic characteristics of those consumers and those shoppers that are actually reacting to our shoppable ads. So our play is a completely branded shoppable play 360 that again we're calling that strategy, and we didn't invented this, but I think that we're one of the pioneers in applying this brand formance.
Vicki, are you seeing for Rakuten any opportunities to drive sales from Super Bowl ads directly?
Well, that is our hope. I mean, I think that as you kind of touched on, Yvonne, like the evolution of thinking about it, like this was a time where it was, I think you said this, Sina, too, a creative showcase. I think we've really evolved from that in a meaningful way, right? I think marketers are approaching it more like a program, and how do you actually use the Super Bowl timeframe, not just that day, to really drive engagement from a brand perspective, but also how do you bring consumers through the funnel once they've seen your spot? And so we've been really conscious of that. And from the beginning, it was all about what is our program, not just our piece of creative for the Super Bowl. And so, we thought about, how do we take that stage right now, where I feel like there's so many teasers out there that were released early, and the trend of even bringing the commercials and releasing them early. It's been something that's been present for a while now, but I feel like this year it's really profound how many people are doing that. So I think we wanted to use this time to obviously drive that excitement, that buzz, that intrigue, then use the time in the Super Bowl to really tell our story, and then post Super Bowl make sure that we have a lot of creative and content in market that's really more lower funnel, that is going to target those consumers that we know saw our spot and really kind of bring them through and educate them on what Rakuten really is, and bring them through the funnel. And so I think that people are really thinking about it much more broadly than just the day of the Super Bowl, and how do you maximize the investment, right? How do you get the most out of this time frame? And absolutely for us, that's been a major consideration on what is that content that we're going to develop, how do we continue to drive excitement after, and how do we bring people to the platform?
It feels like nearly every major brand over the past 6 months or so have been trying their hand at an NFT. We're going to see an NFT make a cameo in Bud Light's Super Bowl ad. Spencer, can you talk a bit about why Bud Light is leaning into non-fungible tokens during the Super Bowl, and how NFTs can sort of extend a Super Bowl campaign?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, listen, everyone touched a little bit on how Super Bowl is more than just a commercial. It's a 360 integrated campaign. And I think really what we've seen over the last 10 years or so have been the evolution of talking at consumers to talking with consumers. And you've seen that spike, and change from just having a Super Bowl ad to then doing pre-releases to social media to e-commerce to all the different elements that people touch on today. I think for me, cryptocurrency, metaverse, NFTs are the next phase of kind of where consumers are going. They're spending more and more time there. And therefore, it's something that our brands need to kind of follow and really carve out this new space. So if we think that a lot of the future of the internet is going to be in NFTs and in metaverse, how do we make sure our brands carve out their respective fair share? And we're really thinking through it in a strategic way. For Bud Light, I think it's a great opportunity. We launched a new brand on January 27th called Bud Light Next. And it's really, for us, it's a zero carb beer. It's the first ever beer that has no carbs in it, which is an amazing accomplishment from a brewing perspective. But we wanted people to be able to own that from day one. So yes, you could purchase the brand. You can also purchase an NFT, which is a collectible from the brand that you can have the day that the brand was born, which is a really interesting concept if you think about kind of democratizing ownership and democratizing information. And I think what you're seeing is, if we think Super Bowl was once talking to consumers, then with social media, it's been talking with consumers. Now I think it's actually taking a step further where you're actually able to have ownership and collaboration with consumers where they can have that into the future. So I think this is just kind of the start for Bud Light. We have a few other brands that are also in the game and doing some other unique things. But I think that NFTs are going to be around for the long term. I think brands that use them correctly can be really, really smart in how they think about marketing and how they think about innovation and how they think about, appealing and democratizing the brand itself.
So moving forward, like what is the potential role of NFTs in marketing? Are they more of like these stunts that are one-offs? Do they have a potential line of revenue tied to them, or are they like something else entirely?
I think it's a great question because I think a lot of brands and a lot of people and a lot of creators are actually embracing this in different ways. So I don't think there's necessarily one answer. For Anheuser-Busch and for our brands, I think of it as being a marketing building capability, right? It's something that we can take our brands and we can allow people to own, to have, to utilize into the future. And listen, you can sell them, you can make money on them, you can use that money for a lot of different things. We're using some of the revenue to basically help us extend our brand programming and do more for consumers that are in the space, thinking about like what utility, what benefits, what events can we give to them and make sure that, they're getting to be a part of, almost like a membership pass. I think some people and some creators might use it and donate 100% of what they're doing, which we're also thinking about for some of our campaigns, some of our programs. And then I do think that there's a lot of businesses that are going to be created and a lot of people and individuals that will monetize it purely for profit. So for us, we're not in it for profit. We're in it to kind of continue to evolve the way that our brands come to life and to expand our initiatives. But I do think that it doesn't have to serve one purpose for one company.
At the end of that same Bud Light spot, we see a woman playing a guitar in a virtual world. Spencer, how are you thinking about the role of the metaverse in marketing moving forward?
Absolutely. I think metaverse itself it's an interesting concept because I think people have their own definitions, right? So if you think about it, yes, it's like something that you can immerse yourself in. I think most people are thinking of metaverse as virtual reality or augmented reality or a place that you can go and spend time, which makes a lot of sense. I think for me, when we think metaverse at Anheuser-Busch, we're thinking about saying, okay, how do we take people from the real world activities that they're doing and convert them and have them to be spending time with us online, right? So I think what you're going to end up seeing is like concerts and experiences and sporting events. There will be a virtual component that we think is going to happen in the long term. I don't think that this is in the next 6 months or a year, if I was being honest, in terms of the advanced nature of it, but I do see it happening in the coming years. And I think for us, as people start to spend more and more time there, we want to make sure that they're spending time with our brands. So I think we touch a lot of different properties as a global company, like the world's largest brewer. We have, concerts and we have venues and we have events and sponsorships and sporting that we want to kind of parallel path that into. I think as people think about the metaverse and where it's going, right now there's a lot of innovation. There's a lot of gaming. There's a lot of, real estate and things that you can go and buy. But what's going to end up happening is it's going to mimic the real world in a lot of different ways. There's going to be football. There's going to be soccer. There's going to be golf. There's going to be shopping malls. There's going to be a lot of different places. Well, if you think about our brands, our full portfolio strategy, each brand needs to have that same exact real world persona mimicked on the online. So we do that with social media. We do that with our content. We do that with our programming and our messaging. But I think that that's going to keep translating to wherever consumers are. And metaverse appears to be something that's coming very quickly. It's something that we're thinking about. And I think then the piece that's amazing about it is just like technology, it actually enables people to come together or be together when they're not physically together. And I think for us, our brands are built around people coming physically together, but this offers a new venue to have them interact with people when they're in different places like us on this Zoom right now.
Yeah. Stina, how do you make concepts like a crypto more palpable to a Super Bowl audience? Some of these concepts I don't think the general public necessarily has a full grasp on yet. They may have heard the words or kind of hear it in headlines, but maybe don't fully understand the concepts. How do you do that on a stage like the Super Bowl?
Sure. I mean, the first, I think, comes from a place of just, not taking yourself too seriously and just understanding that, we're all people, we're all learning here. And it's kind of in a similar vein to, how when the internet first started to become popular and when people started to use email and the, World Wide Web, people didn't necessarily know everything, about it from the get-go. But over time, people got to be more familiar and more comfortable. And, there's a lot that still has to be done in the same way that, it took a while for the internet to sort of come and envelop everybody's lives, or 90% or 95% of people's lives as it currently does. And it's going to take some time. But step one is like, how do we just establish an emotional connection and say, hey, look, we're people, there's people behind this, real people just like you. And we're just talking about, technology. And so in the same way that, things have evolved in sort of other areas of technology that people use every day, crypto is going to be no different. We're just at a little bit of an early stage right now, but it's coming, it's here. And by the way, come check us out. If you want to look at it, come sort of start your journey with us. And so it's really just inviting people to not be afraid and to get involved.
Vicki, how do you see influencers and creators playing a role in this year's Super Bowl advertising?
I have a feeling you're going to see a lot of that. We definitely was a big part of our strategy and making sure that we could tap into that world and make sure that we could extend the visibility of our campaign and the program outside of, just the normal channels of social. So yes, this was a huge piece for us. We also wanted to make sure that it felt authentic. I think there's a big piece about that where people just bring them in just for kind of the showmanship of it all, which is also valuable, I'm sure, in a lot of ways. But for us, it was really thoughtful and purposeful around who we brought in from an influencer perspective, and that they really were people that connected to our brand and that were on the platform and could extend our story in a way that felt really authentic. And so I think you're going to see a lot of influencers for sure. And we're really excited because we actually not only leverage them in our content, our Super Bowl content, but we did in the content that lives after that really drives that education. So I think it's going to be really fun to see how many people actually tap into the influencer space and how that works for brands this year.
Yeah, Twitter has typically been the place where brands speak to consumers and other brands, during the game, before and after. What role do you think TikTok will play in this year's game? Yvonne, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. That's a very interesting question if I think about it, because, and I tell you that the story of avocados from Mexico in the Super Bowl, early on in 2015, we started launching pretty robust digital campaign. The reason is that in our brand, digital was not an afterthought or an extension. It was actually one of the business pillars, at the same level as brand and shopper marketing. Part of the head of each department is reports to the CEO. So digital was taken pretty serious from the beginning. And since 2015, we start working with influencers. In 3 years, we had already a network of 100,000 brand ambassadors that will amplify our message for us in the Super Bowl. But the interesting thing here is that as we have seen the evolution of that influence, the role that the influencers play is completely different right now than what it used to be in the past. Right now, you see that the influencers really own the space. They set the rules of the space, and brands honestly have to relinquish their creative freedom to them, because brands don't know those platforms as well as the influencers. And that has been the huge success of TikTok, because they have given, and brand has given the influencers in that platform complete creative freedom, and they take the brands by the hands and they make them super successful. So what we're doing right now, yes, we have over 100,000 brand ambassadors, and we're talking about nano influencers. There are a lot of them, but they are influencers with, or brand ambassadors that may have 300 followers, but when you have 100,000 of them, then that's a lot. So, but this year we're adding 20 TikTok influencers, but we're activating them in a different way. Like, we always thought we want to play in the TikTok territory, but we want to do something completely different. So we are setting up a pop-up store in New York, in Soho, and we closed actually a very popular store in Soho, fashion store, and we invited those 20 TikTok influencers, and a collection that we had until this point as an only digital collection, fashion collection. We actually manufacture that for that collection for these influencers to go and just try it on and do their thing, the things that they know how to do better than anyone else. So we're creating tons of content for online from a physical location in New York. And we partner with a company that is providing a service called Retail as a Service, which is a completely new concept, but their foundation is that notion of that TikTok made you buy stuff. So we are tying all that to our platform, like we were talking before.
Well, before I let you all go, really briefly, let's take a couple of predictions for what the future of Super Bowl advertising might look like. Do we think that commercials will become NFTs? Will we be watching them in the metaverse? Sina, let's start with you.
You know, I think that I heard somewhere where it's good to be approximately right rather than precisely wrong. And so hopefully I can be approximately right by saying there's going to be a lot of stuff with crypto and NFTs and the metaverse going forward.
Yvonne?
Yeah, I think that the innovations of the Super Bowl, like we were talking before, have been out of the TV spot and on the digital space. My prediction is that the technology is going to come inside the spot. We actually wanted to do that this year, but unfortunately, by the time that we thought about it, we couldn't pull it off. But technology is going to start disrupting the undisruptable space, which was TV. And also, I think that on the digital space, a territory that was reserved for performance or sales, like e-commerce and the retailers' ecosystems, is going to become a branding territory. So brands are going to start building their brands within those ecosystems that has been created and has been like growing in an unprecedented way.
Vicki, how about you?
I mean, I think that we're going to continue to see this explosion of content that comes around the Super Bowl, where it's very interesting to think about at what point will everybody have seen everything before the big day? And then is there actually going to be a playback to we're going to go back 10 years, 15 years from now where nobody's going to want to release anything and it's going to like draw all that attention to that moment? I don't know. But I think that, you know, we're going to continue to see this trend where people are developing a ton of content around the Super Bowl that doesn't necessarily exist in the Super Bowl. And I think that that's for sure going to continue to happen. And I agree also with the technology piece. I think the more that we can invite consumers into the process in a meaningful way, I think is going to really activate the Super Bowl for the future.
Spencer?
I think there will definitely be Super Bowl NFTs, and I think there will definitely be Super Bowl brands that you can watch a Super Bowl commercial in metaverse. I think the question is that the right use of it? Will people do it the right way? Will it be native to the space, or will it just feel like an advertisement? So I think that will something that we have to kind of play out. I also think there will be a few that happen this year, but then in coming years, more and more brands that are there are going to pursue that as well. So I think it's just like the other things we've talked about today. There's the early adopters, even among corporations, and then there will be the followers until it kind of gets through to everyone. So I'll make a bold statement and say I think it's coming fast, and I think we'll be here for the long term.
Great. Well, thank you, Spencer, Yvonne, Vicki, and Sina for joining us. And we will look forward to seeing some of those digital components this year and in the future years of Super Bowl.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for hosting us.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
Thank you.
Bye.
Well, that concludes In-Depth Super Bowl. Thank you to our panelists for their insights and their outlooks on the big game commercials. I'd also like to thank our sponsors for helping to make this live stream happen. We have our co-presenting sponsors, System One and YouTube, and our supporting sponsor, Talkwalker. Thank you, of course, to our Ad Age crew, Lauren Ciardio, Arabella Breck, and Anna Sakula for making this all happen. Keep checking back on adage.com/Super Bowl for all the breaking news and analysis on all of the Super Bowl commercials. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in.